to C, discussion and possible selection on sewer bids. We have seven bids to consider. The bid from Bedrock Sewer and Water has been pulled. He was our low bidder by, $800 or thereabouts. Low bidder now is Urban Visions 2. We had several alternates from Rosga Plumbing. They were a pressurized system. Because we did not bid those alternates are not allowed to be considered by us. Is there a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I have a multiple part motion. My motion would be to accept the bid and award the contract for the town hall sewer lateral or town hall sewer connection to Urban Vision 2 Incorporated based on their bid of $24,590, with those funds being taken from account 5800 wastewater improvement, which I believe has a line item balance of $38,410 in it. I would further move to authorize the town chairman at his sole discretion to expend up to an additional $6,250 if necessary for any changes, modifications that need to be made during implementation of the project. That would bring the total authorization to $30,000, and again the $6,250 if needed would come as well from account 58000 wastewater improvement. And finally, if there are any additional funds expended, that Chairman Merrick would be required to report those to the town board in a timely manner with an explanation for any of those additional expenditures, and I so move.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Supervisor Fisher, just for clarification, your motion is for a total of $30,000?
Yeah, it is, and I need to clarify, but I think the number I gave you there incorrectly, if I might be allowed to do it and ask the seconder, the additional authorization up to $30,000. I had used the number off of Bedrock. I believe the difference between the $30,000 and the bid from Urban Vision of $24,590 appears as though it would be, what is that, $5,410.
Yes.
And if the seconder would allow that, I would ask that the motion be revised for that additional sum of money.
So you're revising the additional amount to what?
5410.
5410?
Yeah, it's the difference
Got it, okay.
between the $30,000 and the $24,590, and I apologize for that.
That's fine.
Okay. Regarding fees, ongoing fees, if we were to repair or replace the septic system, those bids, Supervisor Wolf, came in at what? Somewhere in the neighborhood of?
Well, they were at 40, but now that we can break this down, as far as I know, we're not paying any restoration in the sewer charge, so we can drop those bids down probably around $10,000, 8 to 10,000 on the mountain system.
So somewhere around 30 grand to the mill,
Around 30, yes.
plus the holding tank.
No, that's including the holding tank.
Okay.
And the water that would go into that holding tank would only be the DPW. So if we fix the driveway to keep all the water out of the storm sewer in the DPW that runs down in the heavy rain, I don't foresee having to pump that very often because it'll only be the drippage off of the DPW truck.
Okay. And where was that bid from, that $30,000 bid?
Well, it was a combination, I think, Butler was 22 for the mound. And then odds and ends for wiring the pumps and alarms,
Okay.
breaking the sewer apart in the DPW.
And what was the bid for the holding tank?
That was in that 22. That was the holding tank and the septic system was one bid.
Do you have those by chance? You don't have
Not
them?
with me, no.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I thought, and I may be mistaken, I thought that bid included the pumping chamber or dosing tank, which is necessary for the mound system. I'm quite sure that that excluded any holding tank or holding tanks.
No, it included ripping up the old tank, replacing it with, I think, a 700-gallon tank, and then going from that tank to a separating tank and a pumping tank together, and then also a 3,000-gallon holding tank. That was all in that bid.
I need to see that in order to believe it.
Do you have it?
It would be in that email I sent you, Kathy, but I have no idea what date that was.
Original, when the first cycle,
Mhm.
March.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's take a short break and let's take a look.
And before you leave, do we know what our approximate cost, annual cost, for discharging to the sewer system is gonna be?
We don't have our cost because we don't know how much water, it's gonna be determined on how much water we use. Our well will get monitored. Kathy did do some research and spoke with the city water utility. The average, including all homes and all businesses, is
$284.96 a year, which is $23.75 a month.
284,
$284.96.
and you could argue in a couple of different directions. We have some fire department activity here on weekends. We don't have anybody here showering. We don't have washers and dryers running. So the use, you could argue that the use could be a little bit lower here than the average household and perhaps the average business.
I don't know what this would equate to in terms of the sewer charge, but if you look at the number of gallons that has been pumped since November or December of 2012 into early this year, I looked at that at one point in time, the total amount of gallonage, and you divide it by the number of days, I believe it was around 188, say 200 gallons per day on average. That's a relatively low amount of water usage and sewage generated.
so you're saying that since we've been pumping on a regular basis, we're pumping approximately 200 gallons a day?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
$5.95.
$5.95 per thousand. So if you're correct, Supervisor Fisher, you said 200 gallons a day? Rough, times 365, divided by 1,000, times $5.95 per thousand would be $4.34 a year. $36.20 a month.
What was your annual?
$4.34. Let's see if we can find those bids.
Hmm?
I found them.
Supervisor Wolf, did you ever get to the point of determining what the cost for separating the sewers would be, or catch basins?
No, because I was not given the right to do RFPs, so all I did was went out and got the two estimates for the mound system itself, and then estimated, for the rest of it. But to separate the catch basins, all we're gonna have to do is Y off right by the bathrooms in the DPW and disconnect the sewer discharge right now, cap that Y off, and then do a new Y and run 2 laterals out and around to the holding tank.
Okay. And you figured your total somewhere around 30?
Yeah.
Okay.
Because I added a little more talking to here. They recommended going to a 3,000 gallon holding instead of a 2 because that way they can come in with an empty truck and take a full truck out. So it'll be cheaper for pumping if they do a whole truck. And then also if we want, we can lower the tank a little bit and put the discharge into the top of the tank and increase it to a 4,000 gallon. With the same tank.
So, in that scenario, how often would we have to pump?
I would guess once a year, if that.
Okay,
Because I can't see much going into that sewer if we stop the rainwater from getting into it, into that floor drain. And that will be the only thing connected to it is that floor drain. Because we got a letter from the DNR approving that we don't need to separate the fire department because it's just drippage
right, that's right.
and no oil changing and stuff.
Question, Supervisor Wolf, you're saying once a year, that's your estimate for what size holding tank?
For 3,000?
Okay, so you're figuring around 10 gallons a day or something like that.
And I don't even see it doing that with just drippage off the, I don't think the DPW washes their trucks. I'm not positive, but I don't know. So basically, it would be drippage from their trucks from the winter, and I can't see that being 10 gallons a day.
So is your proposal to leave the bathroom in that building on the mound system then?
Yes. The bathroom we separated from that floor drain.
Okay, so then you're gonna go in and tear up the floor in the building to get new piping out of there to put in a holding tank?
Right.
And
Yeah,
put the holding tank where?
Right. I don't know for sure, but I'm looking at putting it behind the building, between the building and the ball diamond. Because we gotta break up roughly 6 feet of floor in the DPW just to get to the Y. There's a Y that comes from the bathroom and the floor drain, and then Y's out of the building. We need to get to that Y and cut one of those feeds off and run that into a separate pipe. Basically, cut the floor drain feed to that Y off and extend that out the building and around into the holding tank.
So I guess the ultimate question would be why, if you're gonna advocate that, if the initial cost of construction is going to be more, and if that has some anticipated useful service life at which time it will fail, and it's gonna cost us as much or more to maintain it by pumping it Plus, I mean, we got the cost of electrical consumption and so forth to run pumps. Seems to me that would cost more than the city sewer charge. What would be the reason for doing that?
Well, the only concern I've got is right now we figured the sewer charge at the current rate. When they were having their water issue, I was hearing in the newspaper all over that they're predicting their rates to go 3 to 4 times higher than what they are now. The other concern I've got is if for some chance they get their Lake Michigan water, in their application and all the paperwork, it says that they cannot commingle water from our area and pump it to Lake Michigan. So my feeling is we're gonna hook up the sewer. If they get Lake Michigan water, then all of a sudden, we're gonna have to dig up again and run water lines because we aren't gonna be able to pump our town water into Lake Michigan, according to all their paperwork. Because they're saying we can't commingle the water. And that's why, from the papers, the paperwork I saw, that's why the city of Waukesha is working on their conservation, because that was one of the issues I read in a bunch of articles also, is all the leakage in the storm sewer was going into the sewer, and that was doing the same thing. It was commingling water in our community and pumping it to Lake Michigan, and they do not want that, according to the papers I read. So that's why I am not in support of being up to the sewer. I don't want to be dependent on the city. Also, I haven't heard any figures mentioned. We're gonna have to meter our water for the city to know what we're using. So there's another cost to hook to the sewer. And none of that was in these bids that I saw.
Couple of things, I don't think that the estimates for the increase in water was 3 or 4 times increase. I believe the numbers I heard tossed around was a 25% increase.
Can I address that, Mr. Chairman? So I heard a couple numbers thrown around. One was that the average sewer cost for the city in aggregate was $284.96, let's call it $285. And Supervisor Fisher referenced 200 gallons a day usage based on our equipment. And we determined that that would cost us approximately $434 a year based on current day sewer costs, right? Correct. Just want to make sure I got my numbers right, thank you. So if in year one our sewer cost is $434 and we assume that they're going to raise the rates at an average of 6% a year in perpetuity, whether that's right or wrong, I don't know, but it's about 3 times the rate of inflation right now. It's 2 times the rate of normal inflation, but it's 3 times the rate of the current inflation. That would take us to an annual cost of $1,313 in year 20. So it would cost us $1,300 in year 20, based on 6% increase every year. If you bring all that net present value back to the current day's dollars, which is typically the way projects like this are analyzed, it's $12,321. So in other words, if we put $12,321 in a savings account, paying, what rate did I use? I think 2% I used. Yeah, paying 2%, then we would have enough money to pay our sewer costs for the next 20 years. And then go past 20 years because usually by the time you get that far out, it doesn't have that much impact on the overall cost of the project. So if you would take Supervisor Fisher's motion, which is essentially $30,000, and add the net present value, the $12,000, we'd be at a total cost of this project to us for the next 20 years of about $42,000. So I would say that's what we have to understand, how it relates to the mountain project, and whether we want to, that's the proper way in my mind to analyze cost A versus cost B.
Here's something I would toss out that I think is a little bit the fallacy in the thinking. I think we all understand that the requirement or the intention is basically return flow to Lake Michigan if the city gets the Great Lakes or Lake Michigan diversion. My understanding, the primary concern of that is that the city isn't taking water out of Lake Michigan and not returning it to Lake Michigan. And there are big issues there, I think bigger. I think that the town of Waukesha here is basically just a speck on the horizon for that. I mean, if you think about it, if the water that comes from Lake Michigan, if they get the diversion and connection, that is not going to be put into sewers, I mean, there's still gonna be a lot of water that's gonna use to sprinkle lawns, used for firefighting. There's gonna be all kinds of things that simply will not be returned. There will be ground water from infiltration and leaky sewer systems and so forth that will be returned, so that's not a perfect world. But if you want to take the position of saying, if the city of Waukesha gets the Great Lakes diversion, then we're going to be compelled to hook up to municipal water, and all of the funding that's going to be required for sewer charge is going to escalate. How's it any different with the holding tank? I mean, where do you think they take the sewage from the holding tank? It goes to the Waukesha sewage treatment plant. It just goes in the truck and doesn't go with a pipe if we're going to hook up to it. So that argument, I think, kind of falls on its face. If you want to extend it, if they get their Lake Michigan diversion, are they going to say, haul your sewage to McWanago from the holding tank or some other place? Or now, if you want to dump your holding tank into the sewage treatment plant, you have to hook up to city water? I mean, I think if you really think that through, it kind of falls on its face. I think the town of Waukesha going forward is far better served hooking up to the municipal sewer. Again, we have heard comments about the increase in municipal water rates. At this point in time, they are not requiring us to hook up to municipal water as a condition to hook up to the municipal sewer. And I think it's a good deal, and it's a decision we need to make and move forward with it.
Yeah, the only thing is even though we're not getting water, our sewer rates are still gonna be based on the amount of water usage. I can't believe that once they get their water straightened out, it's gonna be just a strict water charge. It's gonna be a sewer and water charge. I own property in Pewaukee and I get city water and sewer bills quarterly. And they do not break out the water and the sewer. It's a water and sewer charge, and it's so much a gallon. I've never seen the city of Waukesha, so I don't know if that's what they have or not. But the other thing you had mentioned is if they pump it and can't take it to the city of Waukesha to dispose of. I don't know how they're gonna work that, because the people that pump our tank at my house pump all over. And they haul it all to the city of Waukesha. So are they gonna make all pumpers abandon the city of Waukesha and put it somewhere else? I don't know. You're right, it's no different than us putting it in here.
Sure, it's going by truck instead of in a pipe, and I think for us to sit here and say, if we were to go with holding tanks or holding tank and a mound, I think we're naive if we're gonna sit there and say that whatever the rate per gallon is now, and I don't remember whether it's 4 cents, 5 cents, 8 cents a gallon or what or not, that's gonna be locked in perpetuity. I mean, anybody, I think, who would think about it reasonably says you're probably gonna pay more to haul sewage to the city of Waukesha sewage treatment plant, be it from a septic tank, be it from a holding tank. You're probably gonna be paying more for that 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 15 years from now, than you're paying for today. I think to assume that that's going to be fixed in place or reduced, I think is naive.
And the other thing, Mr. Fisher, how did you come up with your gallonage? We have not pumped that tank since April. So we've used that tank from April to this point, which you're not including in those water usage numbers, so that's gonna increase quite a bit compared to what you're using, comparing to what we pump.
That's not true, because the figures I used, I think, were like through January, so that's not true.
The proposals here for the mound, do we feel that these two prices of $20,800 from Air and $21,725 from Butler, thank you. Are those the costs that would fix our problem, or are there costs that are not also listed?
The total of those, Mike, Larry is estimating at around 30-ish grand.
Oh, we would have to do this and this?
No,
No,
Oh,
there-
okay.
there's an
we would do
addition to
one of
labor.
those, but then there's extra charges for hooking up the electric and breaking, separating the floor drains.
So you're throwing a fudge factor in of
Right.
$10,000, okay, thank you.
I think as long as your father's company is is the primary bidder for the sewer septic, if you had something to share, we'd be open to listening to it. Sure, yes, please.
Judy Fuller, South 48 West 23440 Merlin Lane. Being in the sewer business and the septic system business all of my life, and of course many, many years in my father's, the objection I would have as a taxpayer to the mound system is this building does an expansion or the fire department does an expansion. What if you decide to build a shelter by the ball diamonds so people could utilize the park? Those are things that are very difficult to add into an existing mound system, whereas it's pretty simple. The worst would be add a manhole at a later date and run a shelter plumbing into. And I can see this park is underutilized, and that's one of my big concerns is expansion and the ball diamonds out here, and get rid of the porta potty. And the contract or the specs didn't have a date it needed to be done by, so you guys might want to set a date if you go forward with the sewer. The last mound system I put into a 3-bedroom brand new house was about $17,000. So Harry Butler or Richie here at 21, 22 for a mound system seems unrealistic, because this is a commercial building, this is not a residential. So those are my concerns. The water utility, because I do have property in the city, they do separate the sewer charge, water charge, and facility charge. So it is broke down on a water utility, Waukesha water utility bill. But I don't have one with me, so. But I do know it is, because there's also a little thing for fire protection. And the other thing about not returning town of Waukesha wells or water from the town of Waukesha through to Lake Michigan, what about all the town islands along Sunset that use wells still that have city sewer? So this building is a tiny little part of that, all the facts, you know, because you've got all the commercial along, some of them are hooked up to water, some of them are not. A lot of the residents over off of Center Road here still use their town water for the water, as long as there's not a cross connection of city water and town water. It can be, a town resident can keep their old well and use it as they see fit, washing cars. But a lot of the sewer areas in the town still have their wells that they use, because some of them don't even have water mains available to them. And I can answer questions if anybody has any.
So Dora, if you extrapolated out the way that you did with the cost of sewage treatment, would you do that same calculation and extrapolate out into that same 20-year period for pumping a holding tank? And I think I think that's kind of an exercise in futility because we're gonna be about this,
How much a
we're gonna
year?
be in dollars.
So how much a year? Just give me a number you wanna spend per year. In year one.
I'm just looking at the cost for what we spent in the past.
Yeah, but if we're thinking that with a new system, it will be once a year or every 2 years, you have to pump it once every 2 years by law. You're only looking at $500 a year?
The easiest way to incorporate it into the formula I threw together while you were looking for your bid would say, it's gonna be $500 once every 3 years, let's just call it $175 a year. That's your point, right? It might not be every year?
Right,
Yeah.
right.
So,
I think what you're,
Once a year.
It's not a fair comparison though to go to what we've paid so far, when it's been pumped.
No, I don't think that's what the chairman was saying.
I think let's assume you're gonna pump it once a year and
Okay.
you're gonna spend $350 a year.
Okay.
I think what you need to consider, and I'm not sure where you're at, but you're gonna be pumping the septic tank and the holding tank.
No. I don't pump, well, you'll have to do it every 2 years, because I would imagine since we're getting a new septic tank, we'll have to follow, unless commercial's different, we'll have to follow the 2-year pumping.
You'll have to pump the septic tank and you have to pump the holding tank.
So maybe.
Two different things. So you're gonna have the cost for both.
Let's assume you're gonna pump a holding tank once a year and you're gonna pump the septic every other year. So 175 and 350.
Yeah, I think those figures are a little low. To do my house is 200, 250 for a 1,000-gallon tank.
Sure.
I
We're
know a
talking
better
3,000 on a
septic
holding tank.
pumper for you.
But the thing is too, we could probably get the holding tank and the septic tank in one truck in 1 year. We'll pay more for the gallonage, but we won't pay more for the trip.
Now frankly, because I was figuring that it was gonna cost in year one $434. Now it sounds to me like you're getting pretty close on what the same cost is gonna be to pump. I mean, you can go $100 either side, but it's not gonna swing the net present value. For instance, if you figure at $350 for the next 20 years, you're looking at a net present value of $9,900. So we just went from $12,000 to $9,900. I mean, it's not chunk change. I want a couple $1,000s over the next 20 years as much as the next guy, but you're not talking about significant sums of money. And remember, it's over the next 20 years. It's not like all of a sudden we have an extra couple $1,000s. It's spread over the next 20 years.
I think you have to throw one more cost into the equation. That would be the cost of replacing that mound at some point. It is going to fail also.
Well, that's why I use 20 years.
But in 20 years, you don't replace the sewer lateral. In 20 years,
No, I
you replace
understand
the
that.
mound.
This is a close call for me. I mean, except for the cost of the sewer, it's almost a wash.
Agreed.
And the $12,000, again, I don't consider that an insurmountable amount of money, especially when it's over the next 20 years. The city of Waukesha has their well-documented problems, no pun intended. So you really don't know how they're gonna control their costs. Is 6% enough? I don't know, but it's a close call.
Can I just ask a quick question? Did you, in your calculation, the cost for pumping the holding tank and the septic tank, did you escalate that cost over time at all?
Yeah, the same 6%. I just changed the number from
Okay.
434 to 350.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, one more.
Yes.
You have to well, you guys may not be familiar with them, but you have pumps on the holding tank. You have pumps on the septic. There's alarm systems, and I'll guarantee you, you're not gonna get 20 years out of a pump. I have yet to see it. And some people will say yes, because they use their usage, but there are things, there's backup alarms that have to be installed, and I don't know if Larry took all that into
That's
account.
included.
And the electricity to run those, and the battery backup, and, okay.
Thank you. Any further discussion? The motion on the table is to accept the bid from Urban Visions 2 in the amount of $24,590 with an additional $5,410 for unforeseen potential change orders for a total of $30,000. Why don't we take a roll call vote? Madam Clerk?
Was it seconded?
Yes.
Can I add one more comment before we do that?
Sure.
The other thought is that we can reject all the bids and rebid it and look at the options that Rosga, the alternates that Rosga had presented to do directional boring underneath the building and or around the building, and also add a grinder in there. I'm not totally in favor of that, but it is an option that could save us some money as far as asphalt repaving and reconstruction of the landscape. Just a thought I'd throw out there.
Go ahead.
Supervisor Radke?
Yes.
Supervisor Wolf?
No.
Chairman Merrick?
Yes.
Supervisor Dorr?
Yes.
Supervisor Fisher?
Yes. Motion carries.